Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
It is Tuesday. Must be the first Tuesday. I
It
enjoy that.
must be the first Tuesday.
That it is.
Oh, look at that participation room filling up with guests. Hello, Mr. Moseley. How are you?
I made it. I made it.
Are you wearing a jacket for this very professional conversation?
You know, it's velvety and soft. It's like dress up pajamas, basically.
Giving us a little
I had,
casual chic, huh?
yeah, I used to wear this jacket so much I had to retire for a couple of years, so I think it could come back. Marcus remembers this.
Dr. Mark.
I retired. It was called the pandemic. I'm so glad I'm here. I was having Zoom problems. I'm on Sandra's computer, so I made it. I'll need to get a script if Luca could share the script with Sandra Delgado's Gmail. And it's so great to be here again with y'all.
Well, let us make sure, Luca, just give me a thumbs up when that script gets over, and we'll and Dr. Marcus is sipping something delicious out of his cup. I'm going to take a sip of my delicious diet soda. I'm not advertising for anyone.
And I'm mending from my cold and drinking water out of my AV Chicago glass.
One of our fine sponsors. One of our fine sponsors. So,
Oh man, I should have got my collaboration mug. Now I'm gonna go to the kitchen and go get that sucker.
you know, I don't have mine because of this move. So I have to find my mug.
Carla's
for
a
these
new
occasions.
studio.
I know I'm in a new studio. I haven't decorated yet, but the wall works for now. The wall works.
All right, away we go.
And welcome to Becoming Collaboration's virtual workshop, where we support each other to dismantle oppression and optimize humanity's potential at all costs. I am Carla Stillwell, Collaboration's producer. Tonight, our topic will be Pay Equity 101, case studies in fair pay and why it is important. Thank you for sharing your life with us tonight. Please note that this is a very special edition of Becoming. And because we want to share this wildly and widely with as many people as possible, this edition of Becoming will be recorded and live streamed. So we're going to give a moment for that to begin. And you'll probably get a little pop-up when the recording starts. So please, if you are so inclined to check that box.
Excellent. I read somewhere that a moment gets classified as 6 to 7 seconds. I'm Anthony Moseley. I'm Collaboration's artistic director. I'm not Sandra Delgado. I'll change my Zoom name. And Collaboration is a Chicago social change company, and we use theater, video, and dialogue to cultivate knowledge, empathy, and change, action, to dismantle oppression of all forms. And at Collaboration, we believe pay equity is instrumental in creating a culture of abundance for everyone. And we think it's a key component to really creating a better world for all. So we're real excited about tonight's show. Marcus, tell them about the show.
Well, I'm Marcus Robinson. I'm the co-director of Enrich Chicago and proudly a Collaboration board member. And today we'll begin discussing pay equity. Simply put, this is the practice of pay equity. Simply put, the practice of pay equity is just like this. It's every employee has the right to equity in pay for equal work. But the truth of the matter is quite different. What a person expects and what they receive are often two different things. The existence of pay discrimination based on race and gender has been a way of life for so very long, too long. And in recent years, government works have woken up to the fact that it's wrong and has begun to establish laws and regulations to eliminate discrepancies in pay gaps. During our time together this evening, we'll do a deep dive into equitable pay practices and offer 3 case studies from Carla, Estela, Rivera of Free Street Theater. Welcome. Uh, Laura Sivak of Second Story. Oh, we got the theaters in the house. And, of course, Anthony Moseley of Collaboration.
Before we begin, let's take a moment to review our community standards. If someone says something that is personally offensive or hurtful to you, you can say, ouch, to let them know you have been hurt. And the offender says, oops, to let everyone know you acknowledge the hurt. We can then address the ouch or move on. And that is up to the person who called ouch. And be warned, if someone starts ouching everyone in the Zoom and speaking with hate or bullying, we will put you on ice so you can cool down for just a second. We have a very special show tonight. But first, we do want to remind ourselves of some things. White supremacy is an ideology. It is not a person. It is not a social construct. It has power. It only has the power it is given to by society. Whether you know it or not, showing up is an act of courage and vulnerability. Let's not judge ourselves or others. This is a marathon, not a race. And we are all at our own place in the journey. We all started at different spots and run in different directions toward the center point. If change starts with you, it also starts with self-care and wellness. The agents of change must take care of themselves, or we cannot take care of others. We described the oops and ouch method. Feel free to employ it at any time you feel the need. And now we have a wonderful new staff member who we have employed to do something new and different for us. So we are going to show you a little video from our community engagement and marketing person, Willow James.
Hi everyone, welcome to Becoming. I'm Willow James, Collaborations, Communications, and Community Engagement Manager, and I'm here with a few updates. Thank you for joining us tonight for Becoming, and we invite you to join us again on April 21st at 7 p.m. for Crucial Connections, for the second of our event in our Pay Equity series. We will also be announcing more details soon for the next event in our season called Moonset Sunrise. You can stay tuned for more info on all of these events by visiting our website, collaboration.org, and signing up for our email newsletter and following us on social media. While on the website, you can also sign up to become a Collaboractivist. Join us as a member and donate for as little as $1 a month. That's all I got. Enjoy the show.
Thank you, Willow, for the great community action. We hope this month's show will make you better prepared for important discussions by deepening your understanding around the complicated intersection of race, gender, and the wealth gap. I am delighted to watch and learn from my dear friend, my colleague here at Collaboration, Elsa Hiltner, as she gives us an overview of pay equity, the movement, and why it is important.
Thank you, Carla. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Elsa Hiltner, Collaborations Director of Development. And inside and outside of my work with Collaboration, I'm an advocate for pay equity in the arts and co-founder of On Our Team. And my activism really centers around growing consensus around the issue because so many people see art as a passion and not a profession. And that is a very privileged and view of the world. And pay equity really removes the economic barrier to the arts. So it's important for any anti-racism work an organization is doing. Can you switch to the next slide, please? So first I want to start with the working definition of pay equity, because lots of people have different understandings. Pay equity is compensating worker roles without bias. It's essentially equal pay for equal work. And it's important to take a holistic view of arts workers as anyone who works to present the art to the public. And it's also important to take a holistic view of compensation as far as wages, paid time off, health benefits, things like that. And you can switch to the next slide, please. Oh, are the slides not working?
Hold on one moment. I think we're having a
started.
little technical difficulty here. There we go. So that was our first slide that Elsa just talked us through.
Oh, nope, that's the one I want. That's the next one. We're
That's
good.
the one you
We're on
want?
track.
All right.
Yep, if everyone
All
can see it,
right,
we're
we're back
good.
on track. Thank
Should we
you.
go back to the top since it wasn't there and then we can get a clean take on it all?
I don't see why not.
You just want to
All
pop
right.
up the definition. That's the important thing. And
There you
I can
go.
add too that in some of the research I've been doing, I've been talking to executives of theater companies, and I've had about 50 interviews with different theater companies so far. And there's a lot of different views of pay equity. And so level setting with this definition is really important because people have very different views of what pay equity is. You can skip to the next slide. I like to start with the benefits of pay equity because it can seem like an expensive action to undertake, but there's lots of benefits to centering it in your organization and like a return on investment. So you can go to the next slide. The first two are financial and artistic. And financial is really the return on investment you get when employees feel valued, they feel like they're on an equal footing, they work harder, productivity increases, there's just a better feeling about the work. And also foundations are really interested in this. And so there's a financial benefit for sharing that work that you're doing on pay equity with foundations. And then artistic, in that same way that people are working harder, they're also putting more care into the work. And so the artistic product that is created is just more cared for in that way and could be of a higher quality work. Collaborations are stronger because people realize that they're on the same footing. And so that is another artistic benefit. And then safety, diversity, and community are the last three. Safety is really if you make space for exploitation through financial exploitation, you make space for other forms of exploitation. Diversity is really about removing the economic barrier to working in the arts. And so if you have more people who are able financially to work at your organization, you'll have a more diverse crew and you'll probably produce more diverse work that can then in turn be a financial benefit and a community benefit because you'll have more diverse work to share with different communities. And then more on the community side, people like to know that they're supporting art that cares for artists. And so being able to share that with your community is really important. We can go to the next slide, please. So through these interviews that I've been doing with organizations, there is a lot of uncertainty about how to approach pay equity. And so I've made this little three-legged stool as an example to show how these three legs, working conditions, accountability, and transparency, uphold pay equity. And each of those legs are made out of small actions that an organization can take. And all of that bolsters a good foundation for pay equity. So working conditions is really focused on following the laws, on pay and worker safety, thinking about the number of hours people work. Accountability is the company able to listen to people when they bring up issues of bias or pay inequity? Do they address problems or ignore them? those sorts of things. And then transparency is really focused on pay transparency. Do people know what others around them are making? Is the budget shared with the staff? Are there job posts with pay rates? Those sorts of things. So if you have all those three pillars in place, the organization's on a solidly good path towards building pay equity, and workers know what the organizational structure is, and they know how their pay rate is decided. And there's a culture of accountability to bring concerns up and then, build a better system if it's needed. And then once you have all that, a pay equity policy is a key part of the process. And that's really a system that determines pay rates so that there's no space for bias, racial bias, gender bias, ability bias, any of those sorts of things to come into play. It can be something really simple, like a base pay, or it can be something more complicated that has, different levels of health and 401k and vacation time. But each organization can kind of make a plan that works for them. And then the next slide, please. So also in my research, I've been working on why it's difficult. If this was easy, everybody would be doing it, and we wouldn't have to have workshops and discussions about it. But it's not, for a few key reasons. And I also want to say that the arts and culture industry as a whole has been built in an inequitable way. And so it's not just a few organizations struggling with this, it's really nearly everyone. So the first thing is it's easy not to question current pay norms. This is how it is. This is the system we've grown up in, come up in. And so we have industry standards, and it's just very easy not to question that. It's important to keep your DIA and anti-racism statements and goals in mind, and then use pay to support those goals and not have pay rates be something that's next to those goals. They are really interlocked. And then pay secrecy is really common. People are worried about sharing pay information. It can be a little scary as far as showing your wages or job posts that might make people feel like there's pay inequity within the organization. And so pay secrecy is really common and makes it hard to know where to begin the process because few people share the work that they're doing. And that's a big reason why I'm so happy about this workshop and the three organizations that are able to share the work they're doing on it and their approach and process, because having access to those models is really important to the work. And then the last slide, please. Thank you. So another reason why pay equity can feel difficult is there's no real clear roadmap. There's not really a system that publicly recognizes equitably paid art right now. And so on our team, which is an organization I co-founded in Chicago, is dedicated to building pay equity in the arts. And we created the pay equity standards, which is based off of the organic and fair trade food labels. And it's a system to, it's essentially a checklist that if an organization checks off all those boxes on the document, these are working condition checklists, accountability checklists, and transparency checklists. They are on a solid path towards pay equity, and they can earn the certification badge. So you can learn more about that on our team's website. And just want to end with pay equity is a process, and there's no real end to the work. It always changes. Inflation and minimum wages change, and structures change within organization. Work changes, and so it's really important to recognize and celebrate movement forward at any point that people are on the path.
Thank you so much, Elsa, for that overview. I am still in my learning process, so that was all quite helpful to me. So now, what we've done for tonight is also we brought together some innovative holistic Chicago organizations to share their case studies on pay equity, where they've been, how and where they're going in the future, what is their plan, and challenges they've faced and in implementing pay equity and the benefits to the organization. The first guest I'd like to welcome for their presentation is Carla Estela Rivera, the Executive Director of Free Street Theater. We're going to drop the website in the chat, their Free Street's website in our chat. And I just want to say with each organization we highlight tonight, please feel free to visit their websites and donate, support however you can. And I'd like to bring up Carla. Hey.
Hi.
So we're just going to give you the floor, and you can talk to us and let us know what you all are doing over there at Free Street.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. As Carla said, my name is Carla Estela Rivera, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of Free Street Theater, where we have been creating work by, for, in, about, and with Chicago communities since 1969. Free Street was founded in the wake of the 1968 riots in the hopes that theater might invite a divided city to come together. And since then, we've consistently adapted our programming to speak to the current needs of the city. We were one of the first interracial theater companies in the city, and one of the first to commit to performing in public spaces across Chicago. And currently we're among those theater companies that are leading the charge for wage equity in the field. We have 2 locations, one located in the historic Pulaski Park building, which is in kind of the Wicker Park Westtown community. And we also have a hyper local space called the Storyfront, which is in back of the yards, which serves as a representation of how an artistic space can serve as an anchor for social change, community development, and economic impact. At our core, we believe that theater matters. And if it matters, we should find ways to make it as accessible and as inviting to as many people as possible. And we have done that through trying to remove the geographic and the economic barriers that folks experience in experiencing theater. And we have 3 core fundamental beliefs that we operate on. One is that communities have the right to self-represent the issues that impact them. So we collaborate with artists and organizations all across the city to support platforms for people to articulate their needs, wants, and visions for their communities, which also means that we bring in a cross-section of seasoned performers and folks from the community that traditionally may not have had access to either experiencing or participating in making theater. And so we create the platform for which they're able to do that. 2, theater should be a space of joy and justice. And we believe that our communities deserve to be celebrated, even as we may share work to change systems that negatively impact our lives. 3rd is that the arts are an economy. In Chicago, arts institutions and arts dollars are largely clustered in the richest and the whitest parts of the city. And we are really intentional about creating performances in historically divested communities because we believe theater can drive local economies. So what does this look like in practice? So all of our performances are offered free or pay what you can, and that has been our staple since 1969. We hire artists in and from the communities we serve. We spend 80% of all project dollars in the communities we serve. We provide free childcare at rehearsals and performances. We provide food and transportation to artists as needed. We work with partner organizations to amplify their social justice efforts in the communities we serve. And we also have done mutual aid efforts, including a 24-hour take what you can, leave what you need pantry in our back of the yard space. We offer capacity building classes for community members to build their skills and enter the workforce in theater by circumventing the conservatory school models that are also, in their own right, pose an economic challenge for many of our communities who may have the skill sets but may not be able to afford or have access to these schools in the ways that other communities might. And during the pandemic, we have paid over 300 artists, mostly Black and Brown, to work on our artistic process and are scaling our internal staff capacity as well. So to do this work, everyone that works with us is paid a minimum of $15 an hour. That is our base pay. So the shift to a $15 an hour base rate, it predates my start as the ED of Free Street. But it is one of the many reasons why I signed up to sit in this seat. Free Street has historically paid our artists and has done so even at a higher rate than that documented $2 an hour average that still exists for non-equity performers. But it was still not enough. And certainly the minimum wage and certainly not the minimum wage as we were amidst our 50th season, which was, gosh, we're going to be 53 now, which is wild. And we were working on our multi-generational piece Still Here, which was a play that focused on racial justice, economic justice, and the woes of gentrification. And during that process, our artistic director, Goya Paz, and the team began to examine this question. If we are a theater company that centers social, racial, and economic justice and accessibility through our external facing work, and it's not reflected in the way we are paying people and our internal ethos, then are we really doing the work? So the commitment to build a runway towards a $15 an hour wage began. So in FY20, we implemented a $13 an hour base pay for our artists and are in our second fiscal year of implementation of the $15 an hour wage. So how do we do it? We received little to no opposition from our board on this pivot. Their guidance was essentially, do what you want, we will bless and release this, but the budget is a budget and you have to make those numbers work. And for context, we are an under 500K organization. So it wasn't like we fell into this pot of money and all of a sudden it allowed us to pay people at this rate. We really had to take deliberate steps towards identifying what our priorities are. And with a budget, me being a moral document, for us, it has always been with the people. Our internal staff is paid either at an hourly or a salary rate, and our most entry level roles begin at the base pay. In an effort to scale our capacity, our team has grown from 2 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff to 2 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff, which we are now kind of scaling to grow to at least 5 full-time positions in a way that kind of meets our capacity. The rest of our artistic teams are contractors, which are 1099 employees, and they are paid an honorarium for their work on a project. We're pretty blessed that in the sense that we have a set of artists and designers who continue to return to Free Street and work with us. They've also been an essential part of our pivot to ensuring that we're not only paying a fair wage, but that we're very clear about what they are able to do within the budgetary and timeline constraints of the work. So our formula when we offer contracts to our contractors is that we estimate the number of hours we believe it would take to complete their work on a particular project, and then multiply that by $15 an hour. And that becomes the amount of the honorarium that we offer. We engage with the artists we want to contract with to determine if the time estimate is feasible. Essentially, here's what we can afford what can you do with that time? And with that becomes like this negotiation and a dreaming of sorts, right? So we still, keep the conversation very positive, but that allows our artists to say, okay, here are the resources we have, here's the time that I have. And it allows them to be able to scale their capacity and their ability to do the work, or whether or not they want to do the work. And while our contractors don't have a clock in, clock out system, we ask them to keep track of their hours, and we have systems in place to address if projects require more time, because sometimes they do. And then we certainly do an adjustment in pay, and we would issue a new contract to reflect that addendum. On an annual basis, we use that data. So the hours worked, we also have postmortems for our projects and other methods of feedback to adjust how we estimate the time and cost needs so that we can continue to refine that model. But it really isn't without that dialogue with our artist community. It's without them, we certainly would kind of be throwing spaghetti at the wall in terms of how we would initially determine that. But also we've been in the game for a while, so we tend to do pretty well with our initial projections, but it's always a consistent conversation so that everybody feels really good about the project they're walking into and what they're being compensated for. And that's our process in a nutshell. But pivots of this kind are certainly not without impact. So this impacts how we scale the number of people in our productions, also the number of productions we have. I will say the pandemic has certainly impacted how we operate in that way. And it will be interesting to see how, as we are moving into our first in-person show that will be opening in June, called 57 Blocks. And so as we move into more public performances and as we continue to scale our projects, we continue to have this commitment, but we certainly have to figure out the number of productions we can have, the number of cast members and such. So that way, we're making sure that even though we might have less people within a production, that everybody is getting paid equitably. And there are certainly organizational constraints that we have to work through to make this happen. It's also important to understand that on top of the racial justice issues brought up earlier in this discussion, the thing that I ruminate a lot about is that our profession and the art sector writ large is one that is penalized for how powerful the pull towards our vocation is. So these hustle tropes, the systemic complicity in minimizing the importance of our sector, in recognizing that our workforce is truly a workforce that statewide and nationally, by the way, brings in more dollars than agriculture, has been continuously marginalized by the lack of public dollars and line items that would support a smaller organization like mine. Our sector has been complicit in this as well, where we see some of our wealthiest and deemed the most prestigious institutions engaging in this activity through unpaid internships or going into communities to fish for compelling stories, but then the communities are not necessarily compensated for those stories or the labor that they engage to provide these stories, or even the access to even see them. And so, the other part too that I'd like to say is that, before we move into the sunset of victory by moving towards a $15 an hour wage, we also need to recognize that a place like Chicago, that's still poverty wages. And for organizations like Free Street, whose sole purpose is to engage in the most divested communities, both in income and in arts richness, we really need our leaders and communities to engage in a culture shift that elevates how essential our sectors are, and that we require more advocacy, more public dollars, and more public will across other sectors to really create the conditions that make us an essential part of the economy instead of one that is, recreational or something that we all kind of choose because we like, right? And, my dream is certainly to see a time where someone can raise a family on an artist's wage. And, we certainly, as leaders have our challenges within our institutions, but also how are we also engaging collectively in forums like these and others to also elevate how we can engage in the systems change that needs to happen in order to create more opportunities for us to have the capacity to not only pay our artists, but create more work that is also accessible across communities.
Carla, listen, you're talking and I'm taking notes because there are some things before we move on with the conversation. And again, Free Streets website is in the chat. You guys, please visit the organization and support as in any way you can. A couple of things I think are important as we move forward. Carla, you said that a budget is a moral document. The budget is reflective of the values of an organization.
That's right.
So I just wanted to highlight that. For those of you who don't know about theater and what it costs, an organization that is $50,000 or less is considered a mid-size organization. Between 250, 50,000, that's a mid-size organization. That's nothing. That's nothing. It seems like a big number, but to create and to do the work that Free Street does on that budget is really pulling teeth, because some of the regional theaters in this city are millions of dollars, not one or two, 10, $20 million budgets. So just keep that in mind as we have these conversations. And the last thing I want to say and point out before I move forward to second story is, Carla says, she said when she talked about $15 an hour being still, especially in a city like Chicago or New York or LA or Seattle, just for context, that's $31,200 a year. That's it. That's what $15 an hour is. So I just wanted to highlight those points. Thank you. Stay around because we'll be back to you in a second.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So stick around. We're coming right back to everybody. But now I'd like to toss the ball to my friend I haven't seen in a very long time.
I know, Steppenwolf days.
Steppenwolf days. One of those big organizations.
I know it.
The managing director now of Second Story Theater. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Carla. So good to see you.
So good to see you. Listen, I'm gonna get out your way because I want to hear what you are saying as well. So
perfect.
Take it
All
away.
Right. Thank you so much. The slides are going to get pulled up right now. Thank you all for having me as part of this conversation. I'm just so honored to be here. I'm going to focus at the beginning less on Second Story's pay equity policies and processes that we have in place, though I will certainly touch upon them. Instead, I want to approach this conversation from the pay equity journey perspective. First, a little bit about Second Story. Second Story is a 23-year-old storytelling organization committed to living in a world driven by empathy. Located in Albany Park, we create spaces where people can share and deeply listen to real, well-crafted stories. We produce performances, we offer classes and workshops, and we partner with businesses of all sizes and types through our Culture Builds programming. In addition to our 5-person full-time staff, we employ 150 artists and facilitators annually through these programs. Fun fact, we just returned to our first in-person show this past weekend, and being in a room with 100 people was a real new experience, and my voice is still recovering. So I'll be pausing lots for water. As an organization with a 45-person collective, which includes company, staff, and board members, our folks have been on their own pay equity journeys. Now, we've always compensated folks without discrimination, but we have certainly not compensated folks well. And over the last several years, we've energized our full collective around the firm belief that art is labor and that artistic labor should be well compensated. As Carla Stillwell, because we have two Carlas today, mentioned at the beginning, conversations around pay equity, much like conversations rooted in investigating white supremacy, are a marathon and not a sprint. And so I deeply appreciate the framing that each of us is at our own place on our own journey. So in the spirit of transparency, I'm going to talk about my own pay equity journey as a tool to frame pay equity conversations for folks that might not get it immediately. Next slide, please. All right, so I moved to Chicago in 2009 for a 9-month unpaid internship at a mid-size equity theater. After that internship, I started an apprenticeship at a regional equity theater where I worked 28 hours a week for $8.25 an hour. When not working at the theater, I was slicing cheese and meat at Jean's sausage shop and substitute teaching on Friday mornings to make ends meet. So from 2009 to 2011, I'm in my paying my dues phase. And I'm young and in my early 20s, and it feels really sexy to pay my dues. And what was happening during this time, though, is I was forming this idea that to work in Chicago theater, one must pay their dues. Or in other words, one must do free labor. And because I did it, I firmly believed that others should have to do it too. Not once did it occur to me to hold these institutions accountable or to question those pay norms that were already established. In 2014, I joined Second Story and I'm responsible for our budget, which makes me now in charge of artist compensation. And then in 2016, I dig my heels in real deep with a director who Second Story had previously worked with. She tells us that she's only accepting jobs where the stipend comes out to roughly $10 an hour. So I get really salty because I knew the director accepted jobs at larger theaters. And because I knew what they paid, I knew it was nearly impossible that this director was making stipends based on $10 an hour. And in that moment, I was using the pay inequities at larger institutions to absolve me of my own pay inequities at Second Story. I was also operating from a scarcity mindset and said, no, we can't do that, and moved on. Then in 2019, Chris Vire shares this article, and he asked the question, where does non-equity theater go next? And I'll drop it in the chat later on. And it sparks this major dialogue on social media, and this leads to a lot of conversations, and eventually to Second Story launching the Leap to 15 campaign, but I'll get there. Next slide, please. Are you a club or are you an organization? This question was posed on social media by a storefront director, a director who has also worked with Second Story, continues to work with Second Story, and it really unlocked something for me. There's nothing wrong with being a club or a community theater, but if Second Story is going to purport to be a professional storytelling organization, then we must accept that how we compensate folks is a marker of our professionalism. So, like a good managing director, I went to our budget and I started doing some math. A teller, these are the people who are the face of our organization. They're who you come to listen to. And after you listen to them, you want to be the teller, sharing your story. At Second Story, around this time, a teller spends roughly 25 hours creating a Second Story story. And we were paying those tellers $30 stipends, which came out to $1.20 an hour. This rate, as Elsa eloquently put it, treats the art at Second Story like a passion and not like a profession. I was really embarrassed, and I got it. And Second Story's artistic director, Amanda Delheimer, was glad that I finally caught up. And we spent the next months in heavy conversation that eventually led us to the Leap to 15. Next slide, please. The Leap to 15 was a multi-year campaign that included adopting a transparent pay model, paying stipends based on $15 an hour rate for every artist that we work with, and a commitment to evaluate artist pay every season to adjust for cost of living changes and inflation. In year one, Tellers that had previously been making $30 stipends were now making $150 stipends. In year 2 of the campaign, that's the fiscal year that we're in right now, those tellers are now making $375 for every show that they tell a story with. By increasing our stipends, we are removing an economic barrier and creating opportunities for folks to say yes to artistic work. And moving forward, we are anchoring artist and facilitator compensation as part of our growth plan each season and have a multi-year plan to increase artist compensation to stipends based on $25 an hour over the next several years. We've now fulfilled our Leap to 15 commitment, but we still have so much farther to go as an individual organization, but also as a sector. Next slide, please. This question right here, can arts workers thrive, is top of mind right now because we want to expand the conversation of artist care beyond pay equity. Because to us at Second Story, pay equity is one piece of the puzzle to creating a better world for arts workers. And so funded by the Arts Work Fund, we recently launched the Rising Tide Project. This project is rooted in creating a framework for what it means to achieve pay equity, investigating new models of care, and imagining what it means for arts workers, artists, and arts administrators to thrive as opposed to just survive. This work includes a series of town hall discussions as well as a partnership program with other theaters that want to implement pay equity policies, but don't know where to begin. Hence the name, because we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. Our next town hall is on April 11th at 6:30 on Zoom. I'll drop this in the chat in a moment. And it's called Pulling Back the Curtain on Pay Transparency. And in that conversation, we'll explore what pay transparency means, how it can look, and what it can do for individuals and organizations, for freelancers, and for staff. There are so many entry points into the pay equity conversation, and where that conversation goes next is up to us to decide.
Whew. Lauren, I want to highlight before I ask you to stick around. I do want to highlight. I take notes. This idea of paying your dues. It is the hustle mentality. I'm so glad you highlighted that for the rest of this conversation. And the other thing that I think leads directly into what our next presenter is going to talk about is the scarcity model and operating from this idea that there's not enough and this place of fear. It's very important that you brought those things up. Thank you so much. Stick around for questions. See you in a second. Now, our final presenter for the evening is somebody I happen to know very well, is Collaborations Artistic Director, Anthony Moseley, who's been around the block with this organization for quite some time. And he's going to share a little bit about what we do over here. And after that, we're going to try to get to some questions very briefly. All right, Moseley, you're up.
Thank you, Carla. Following those two great presentations, I'm gonna try to be brief because they laid out so many great things. Some of them connect to the Collaborations work. So let's do it. Collaborations pay equity policy. We are in Collaborations 25th season, and it took us almost 25 years to really change the way that we budget and pay our people. Let's go ahead with the first slide. So we have a pay equity policy that ensures that all workers are paid within a living wage in Cook County. And in Cook County, that the minimum living wage that we see is $18 an hour, which comes out to about $38,000 a year. And some people we pay upwards to $24 an hour, especially if we're asking to use their own equipment or assets that depreciate. And let's talk about where we started and how we got here. So in our current pay equity and transparency policy, the company fairly pays all employees and 1099 staff for their time. We've seen how the culture has really benefited from an employee-centric environment. And that grew out of changing our programming. So not only do we have to change our budgets, but we had to change the way we conceptualize the form of our shows. So we've gone to shorter rehearsal periods, smaller runs throughout the pandemic and coming out. And we've also been filming everything with multiple camera video shoots so that we can make sure the work lives on and builds a larger regional and national audience that might not be able to come see us in person. This triumvirate of shifts in our format has made sure that we can pay everybody $18 for every hour that they spend on our projects. And overall, since we've made these changes, revenue has increased. There's not just one ingredient that you add to the soup to change it. There's been a lot of things changing, as we know, since the pandemic. The consciousness of our city and our country has changed. So has some of the divisiveness. But we have seen that pay equity for us has been beneficial to our culture and to our revenue. Next. And the pandemic, the great pause finally gave us the opportunity to kind of get off the production assembly line and pay people the way they should be. Before our pay equity policy, we relied on free labor to fully deliver our programming. We couldn't do what we said we would do without unpaid intern hours and artist and actor stipends that were left unchecked as far as how many hours people put in, and ended up having people feel overworked, burned out, stressed out, and tired, myself included. But we've made some changes. Let's go to the next slide. And when we talk about paying our dues, that was the culture that I came up with, and I worked for Free for Collaboration for 10 years, and then we started throwing parties to pay for our rent, and then we started doing contract work to just keep our head above water. And it took the pandemic to give us the time to pause and stop and really reflect. Next slide. So now, like I said, everybody is paid $18 an hour. All actors, artists, youth, elders, assistants, directors, and our staff are now all W-2 employees. Everyone's based on a 40-hour work week, and we've come up with a pretty interesting base pay model to be fully transparent and equitable with our pay, where our executive leaders get a base pay of $1,000 a month, our department heads get $500 a month, and our managers get $250 a month. And that is seen as an extra stipend or base pay to compensate for the additional responsibilities, management oversight, and that usually comes with hours as well. And all of our W-2 employees gain a 2.5% automatic raise on their base pay every year. And workers who are not on the staff are paid in the $18 to $24 range. Also, our union and non-union workers are all compensated the same. So we have a project in which we are using union workers, and recently we did. For the day that the union wages kicked in, we paid the non-union wages the same day rate. And everybody was real happy about that. Next. Is there another slide? Is that it? That's it. Okay. So yeah, that's an overview of our pay equity policy. Having Elsa Hiltner as a company member, collaborator, and staff member has made a huge influence on our company. And we're really excited to be able to participate in this program. We're getting ready to certify as a pay equity standard And just delighted to be here with Carla and Lauren and everyone else.
I would love at this time, first, again, in the chat, Free Street website, Second Story, please, please, please go support and be a part of their community, because they are a part of our community. And we're a little big old family around here. But I would like to invite everyone back to the table. Elsa, I don't know if you're if you're still there and you want to be on voice, but I would love to invite Dr. Marcus and Carla with a K and Lauren back to the table, and Elsa back for voice, and just open the floor to our visitors to ask questions, to tease out anything you didn't understand from this dialogue, and actually maybe start, Dr. Marcus, maybe you can start this off with some reflections, because you've been doing this thing for a minute now.
Well, I'll say this: if you really want to have an impact in the quality of an artist's life, you pay them well for 100% of their work. And I like this idea that Laura and Carla with a K and Anthony have done to create these baselines, so that if you work with us and you can stitch together working with other companies and arts who have a similar ethos as us, then we know that if you do that 2 or 3 times and we make a little karetsu out of it, you're making a living wage. That's what you're making, a wage that you can at least hold your own as an artist in Chicago. And I love this idea of reaching into the future and pulling, $25 or whatever number you want out of the hat and pulling it into the present. Pulling it into the present, because of the all of the money that's required, it comes from exactly where the money comes from today, wherever it is now. 100% of it. So you never need to consider whether or not, is there enough? Can we fundraise enough for it? But of course, you've always fundraised enough for whatever you did. Can we sell enough tickets? But of course, you always sold enough tickets to survive the dang on thing, right? So then, why don't we just pay ourselves as the professionals that we are? You can't, know what you can get an RN for these days? About 5 times what you can get an MFA. RN. And I'm not begrudging the RN, particularly in this weather, right? The climate, the pandemic and all. But as you can see, our humanity and the art that is the reflection of our humanity is as valuable to us as the human body itself. There is
because when the human body is gone, the art
no
is what
humanity.
remains.
Yeah.
The art will outlive all of us.
Yeah, I totally get it. Thanks God for things that last longer than a human body. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the primary reason why arts, I shouldn't say primary reason why, I don't blame the victim. But one of the reasons why is that all of us got indoctrinated in a particular way. And Lauren, I did the same thing you did. I paid some hellified dues, all right, and ROI was pretty dang on low until we decided to along with artists like yourself to say, you know what, there's got to be a baseline. I don't need to be Elon Musk, but I gotta be better than than holding the cup on my local street corner, because those cats making about $20-$25 an hour shaking the cup. Full stop.
Any additional thoughts? I saw some finger snapping and some head nodding from Lauren and Carla.
One of the things we've been talking about at Collaboration is is making sure that our audiences and the public understand the need for them to really vote with their dollars and support organizations that are creating good work environments for the artists. And that starts with, politically minded, community-based organizations like ours, but it really goes all the way to Broadway in Chicago, and building awareness among our audiences that, you shouldn't support shows that don't take care of their people. And if they knew that, maybe people would spend their money and their time differently.
Well, look, if we don't have any questions, let's check in the chat, see if anybody wanted to jump in with any comments from there. You don't have to come on camera. You can drop them in the chat. And we will be making these presentations available on our YouTube channel, and we will make them available to you, Carla and Lauren, so you all can take this with you. Just pick it up and send it to folks. Like, look.
Oh yeah, that timeline. That timeline was great. I think like everybody should do a timeline and compile a bunch of them, because there's a lot of interesting data and unpaid work in those timelines.
Mine starts in 1996. And it was long. Thank you all so much. Hey, Andy in the chat. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Lauren. Please visit their websites. Thank you so much, Dr. Marcus. As always, we can't do this without you. Moseley, thank you so much for being the best part of Collaboration. I will be seeing you all very soon. And thank you to everyone. This programming on Collaborations Together Network is made possible by the support of our sponsors, AV Chicago, the Mark and Jeannie Malnati Foundation, the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, our season sponsors, and people like you who can make a one-time donation at collaboration.org or sign up to be a Collaboractivist for as little as $1 per month. Stick around for a special screening of Jasmine Cardenas' Essential Tengo que Trabajar from our Peace Book performances of 2020. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening.
You're going to love that video. Please stick around for that. Oh,
thank you,
please
Carla,
stick around.
Goodness.
Perdí 3 meses, 4 meses sin trabajar, pero el permiso se pagó todo completo, eso sí. Eso sí, muchos de nosotros tenemos permiso y pagamos impuestos. No estamos trabajando nomás así gratis, porque nada es gratis ahora. Fue entre familia de que me ayudaron, me apoyaron mis hijas. Entonces, ya en el mes de mayo ya empecé a salir a la calle un rato a trabajar, ¿verdad? Por ratitos. siquiera sacaba para mi comida en la tarde, porque no todo el día, nomás es como unas 2, 3 horas y ya me metía. En el mes de julio 6, nos dieron permiso de entrar en el parque. En el momento cuando dijeron que se cerraban las escuelas, pues yo me sentí mal porque de ahí es mi sostén, ¿verdad? No tengo un trabajo más que eso. Entonces, pues yo me andaba queriendo deprimir porque no tenía nada que hacer y quien me ayudara también con mis gastos. Pero Dios también es grande de que me ayudaron mis hijas a pues seguir adelante. Nadie también nos puede ayudar, no nos apoyan en nada de que nos puedan ayudar en algo, ¿verdad? Entonces nosotros tenemos que trabajar para poder también sostenernos en lo que necesitamos en casa.
Part of my business is entertainment, so I do work as a photographer. I do work do balloon decor. I do work as a clown. Demolition. I do low voltage cabling. I dog sit. When the coronavirus pandemic hit, all of my bookings got canceled. I had bookings set up for every weekend just about on through June. And being separated from people, it has a way of making you feel like you're alone even though you're not alone. You know, it's a telephone call where you can call somebody, but not everybody can come running. But it's just good to know that everybody's not in this thing alone. When you hear the word essential worker, I think of people helping people with their lives. You know, people that are on the front lines doing medical work are essential workers. They are very much so essential workers, but also the people that live next door and are helping people down the street are essential as well.
Bueno, nosotros en enero, que empezó esta epidemia, que nosotros nos empezaron a llamar nuestras patronas, decir, ¿sabes qué? Es como si el mundo se viera paralizado, ¿verdad? Porque nos empezaron a llamar y a decir, ¿sabes qué? No quiero tus servicios ahorita por lo pronto. Yo perdí mucho trabajo. En mi limpieza de casas que estaba, yo perdí mi trabajo, muchas ya ahorita no me han hablado, desafortunadamente no me han hablado. Sí me mandaron al principio para ayudarme, estoy agradecida con las personas, mis patronas que me ayudaron y sí me llamaban para ver cómo estaba, si estaba bien y todo. Según, como decían en la tele, que la mayoría de los hispanos éramos más los que estábamos infectados del COVID-19. Entonces, a mí me llamaban, pero ahorita sí perdí mucho trabajo, mucho. Entre vecinos y todos nos han dicho, ¿sabes qué? Mira, están regalando comida, están dando en lugares acá por donde mi barrio, por donde yo vivo. Entonces nosotros hemos ido pues con temor y miedo porque también estamos al miedo de que podemos agarrar esa enfermedad. Entonces más de la tercera edad, pues como no pueden salir, pues nosotros les hemos brindado llevarles una caja de verduras o de lo que nos dan. Entonces les dábamos también a las personas porque desafortunadamente hay gente que no puede salir. O familiares también cercanos si les hace falta algo, porque aquí estamos a ayudarnos unos para los otros, estamos para ayudarnos. Y eso es lo más importante. Pero aquí estamos y Dios no nos ha dejado desamparados.
La esperanza lo encuentro y lo tengo. Cualquiera de nosotros que quieramos encontrar la esperanza es con Dios, porque nadie más nos puede salvar y ayudar y cuidar. Es nuestro Padre Celestial. Todos los días pidan sanidad y protección.
We don't know who chose to give up. And we don't know all the people that are fighting for their lives. You know, being amongst people and helping and loving on people and being a part of relationships with people, and then even my own relationship with God, you know, that has always been my inspiration.
La verdad, yo tengo muchos años trabajando en mi trabajo y eso es lo que amo, mi trabajo. Entonces mi esperanza es seguir luchando para limpiando otra vez casas para salir adelante, que me llamen y salir adelante es lo que quiero, es mi lucha, de que eso es mi sostén, mi trabajo, que adoro, amo mi trabajo.
And for a couple weeks, I would just ride through the community and just play music. Positive and uplifting music.
Jesus, hear me pray. Please hear these words I'm saying. Wash my soul with water from on high. With the world of sin behind me, no evil thoughts to bind me. Lord, if you leave me, I would die. Just hide me in thy bosom till the storms of life are over. Rock me in the cradle of thy love. Only feed me till I want no more. Then take me to thy blessed home above. With faith I am attaining, I go on uncomplaining. Before this time another year. Though all my friends forsake me.